going to start off by telling a story. The time I was lost at Disneyland when I was 6 years old. Back in 2006, my dad and I took a father-daughter trip to Disneyland. To be honest, I don't remember much of the trip, but I do remember how it ended. It was late afternoon, and as per tradition, before we went home, we stopped at the Main Street candy shop to buy caramel apples for my mom and brother, who we had left at home in San Diego. So, while I was mesmerized by the lollipops that were bigger than my face, out of the corner of my eye, I swear, to this day, I saw my dad leave the shop. And of course, being the dutiful daughter that I was, I followed him. So as I followed my dad down Main Street, I began to realize, wait, this guy isn't my dad. He is far too tall, buff, and handsome to be my dad. Kidding, Daddy, I love you. But here I was, in the middle of Disneyland, in a sea full of strangers, and utterly petrified. I was experiencing one of the most terrifying experiences a child could face. I was lost. Now, I don't really remember what happened next, but what I do remember is that I knew my dad would find me. And sure enough, he did. I didn't know this until my junior year of high school, when my dad and I decided to take another father-daughter trip to Disneyland. But apparently, that was one of the worst moments of his life. Not only was he utterly panicked, he shut down Disneyland while I was lost. Nobody in and nobody out until I was found. Now, you are probably wondering how this story is relevant to my experience with Thinking Beyond Borders. Well, the year prior to coming on TBB, I was lost, just like I was at Disneyland, except this time, I knew my dad would not be able to find me. I knew my parents wouldn't be able to shut down the entire world and make everyone stop until I was found again. No, the only person who could find me was me, because I was lost in myself. See, from January up until a week before coming to Guatemala with a group full of strangers, I was in an outpatient hospitalization program for depression and an eating disorder. And coming on this program, I no longer knew who I was. I defined myself so much on the things I had left behind when I entered the hospital. I was the senior class rep. I was straight A student. I was president of a million clubs. All the things that pointed to the idea that I was doing fine was ripped away from me. So here I was in a new country with 17 strangers, and as the fates had it, one of our very first assignments was to share our river of life. The point of this assignment was to share who we were with the group in about 20 to 30 minutes. Going into this assignment, I thought I was very prepared. I mean, I had been talking to strangers about myself for the past 9 months. So when the time came for me to share my story, I talked and I talked. I shared everything that I thought defined me for about an hour. And keep in mind, we were only supposed to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes, max. So I told the group about everything I struggled with. I told them about how I had been experiencing my eating disorder since middle school, how I've been dealing with depression for much longer, how rocky my relationship was with my parents, and how we went to fix that, how angry I was at my brother, and how alone I felt when he left for college. Needless to say, I spoke about everything that was not good in my life, because I thought those experiences were who I was. But with my river, I never did answer the question, who are you? Who is Rachel Gordon? And the second I finished my river, I realized that I didn't answer those questions, that I couldn't answer those questions, even if I wanted to, because every time I looked inside myself, I would just wind up getting more and more lost. So thus began my quest for my time at Thinking Beyond Borders. Figure out who the heck Rachel Gordon is. So, after a whirlwind couple of weeks at Ushlabil, we made it to TechPon and truly began our TVB experience. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, everything I said in my river is behind me. It is the time of the new Rachel. And I wish I could say from that point everything was great and easy, but anyone who experiences mental illness, or who has a loved one who experiences mental illness, knows that healing isn't always on an upward trajectory. And it definitely was not all uphill for me either. TechPon was hard, to say the least. When my host family said I was fat, my eating disorder reaffirmed it. When I was the slowest person walking home every day, I wanted to cry. And when I was too depressed to get out of bed for a week, my shame took over. I was scared to tell the leaders, so I lied and told them I had diarrhea like everyone else in the group. And I couldn't tell my parents, who were my biggest support, because I didn't want to admit that even after 9 months of treatment and thousands of dollars, that I still was not okay. So I kept all of that in, and I didn't tell anyone because I thought I was alone, and I thought I could handle this myself. Well, of course, that all came to a head, and that was during our hike up the volcano Pacaya. Prior to the hike, I was very nervous. I had been walking back from seminars alone because I was slower than everyone else, so I imagined that this wouldn't be much different. And although I was the last one up the volcano, unlike my walks home, I wasn't alone. Emma and Isaac had walked with me. To this day, I am still not sure if they know how much their company meant to me. It meant the world to me, because with every step I took, my mind was telling me that I couldn't do it, that I was weak, that I was fat, and that I was worthless. But with their help, their patience and their encouragement, I made it to the top of Pacaya, and I realized that I wasn't alone, that I had 17 new friends who were there for me. And it was okay not to be okay, and it was okay to receive support. This moment was a catalyst for me realizing that I had the strength to do this trip, to take charge of my life. And even though my friends' support helped get me up that volcano, it was my body that carried me up the hill, it was my feet that kept me standing, and it was my willpower that told me to keep going. I knew that even though I was still lost, that I could do this. And although I had these moments like the one on Pacaya, where I felt strong and empowered and awesome, it wasn't as if those feelings stuck for the rest of the trip. It just wasn't smooth sailing. No, I still had a lot of self-doubt. It wasn't better with the snap of a finger in spite of how much I wanted it to be. Going into Thailand, I still struggled every day. It was only through experiences I shared with others and shifts in my perspectives that allowed me to move towards some of the changes I wanted to see in myself. One of these experiences I had in Thailand was with my host sister Lex from Guatemala. So Lex and I were having a conversation about how I still really struggled with body positivity. And she told me that even though she can't always be positive about the way she looks, she can still appreciate the strength of her body and how it carries her the places she needs to go. I had a very similar experience at Pacaya, but hearing it from someone who seemed so effortlessly confident and in love with herself affirmed the idea that self-love didn't necessarily come from achieving some external goal. It was about feeling gratitude towards what you already could accomplish. This moment was pinnacle for me because this idea of appreciation and gratitude towards what I could do could also apply to treating myself with more compassion rather than the impatience I was feeling towards my internal struggle. Although all I wanted was to figure out who I was, who Rachel could be without the weight of her eating disorder and without depression. I wasn't taking the time to love the parts I already loved about myself. But even with that notion, deep down, I believed that since I was still struggling with those aspects of myself, that I couldn't discover who I was and I couldn't love myself. But the problem wasn't that I was struggling with mental illness. It was that I was trying to find this idealized version of myself, that I was trying to discover something within me. When I was talking to my good friend Libby about not knowing who I was, she shared something with me that shaped the rest of my experience at TBB. What she told me is this: life is about creating yourself. If you spend your time trying to find yourself, you will always wind up feeling lost. Mind blown. The idea of creating myself, building myself up from the foundations that I had already begun to lay these past few months. When she shared this with me, something just clicked. It was like the missing piece in the question, who is Rachel? The reason I couldn't figure out who Rachel was, who she was to me, and who she was to others, was because I hadn't made her yet. I hadn't really defined who I wanted to be and set out for it. From there, I started on a new goal. Rather than find myself, I was going to create myself. With this idea of self-creation, I grew to accept the things I was still working on, or the questions I still had about myself that went unanswered. In Thailand, I took the time and space to begin construction on myself. I journaled, I painted, I played chess, I knitted a scarf, I danced around the house with my host sister Hadia. I allowed myself to cry without guilt. I allowed myself to experience my feelings of depression without shame. I opened up to my friends more about my struggles and my hopes. But most of all, I was patient with myself. Because like I mentioned earlier, the journey to health isn't linear, and construction on new buildings is always delayed. There are always hiccups on the work site, no matter how much you pay the contractors, workers, and managers. There was still that time when I cried to Adia about how I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Or the time I was scared that I wouldn't get any gratitude notes from the group at Thanksgiving because I couldn't really imagine what they would be grateful for about me. Even with this idea of creating myself, I still struggled. But the difference about it this time around was that I allowed my depression and eating disorder to be part of me, but not define me, because that's not who I wanted to be. I didn't want to be all the things that have happened to me. I wanted to be so much more than that. I wanted to be strong, and I wanted that strength and security to come from myself. I no longer wanted to look inside myself and feel lost. I wanted to look inside myself and feel comforted, because I knew that through the hard times, I would be there for myself. Even though I am still working on these feelings, I felt that sense of security more than I have ever felt before when I was in Ghana. For many of us, myself included, Ghana was the most difficult portion of the trip. I was very homesick. It was really hot. The internet sucked. Men treated me uncomfortably. Some of my closest friends had to leave the trip, and overall, I was just tired. And I was tired of TBB, and I wanted my dog. I mean, I wanted my parents and family too, but most of all, I just wanted my dog. But while there were all these external struggles I was facing in Ghana, I still felt so incredibly secure in myself. I felt more me than I had in my entire life. And most of all, I knew in my heart of hearts that I could finish out the trip strong and thrive in every moment. I can't point to one place where this idea of inner strength clicked for me, because it wasn't just one moment. It was built up brick by brick, and every time the cement wouldn't quite harden, I would just keep working until it was more solid than before. I can't say coming on TVB showed me who I am, because I still don't exactly know who that is. I am still building her, and I will be for the rest of my life. But what TVB has done was create a space for me to give and receive love, to question everything about the world and myself, to stand on my own 2 feet. I will be eternally grateful for this experience because it helped me create a piece of myself. It showed me that I can be strong even when I think I can't climb to the top of the volcano Pacaya. And it showed me that even when I feel weak, broken, and alone, that I can find security and compassion in myself. I want to take a moment to thank everyone on Thinking Beyond Borders who made this trip so special for me. Thank you to Lex for being a friend, a sister, and listening when you didn't even understand. Thank you to Emma for being my hiking partner. Thank you to Naomi for being my sister in every sense of the word except blood. Thank you, Francisco, for being a brother when I so desperately missed mine. Thank you, Harold, for making me laugh when I wanted to cry. And thank you, Molly Fox, for crying right alongside me. Thank you, Zachary, for teaching me it's okay to laugh at myself. And thank you, Lillian, for sharing books with me when I needed to escape. Thank you, Molly Herring, for opening your heart to me and always being my morality sounding board. Thank you, Corey, for always having open ears and open arms when I needed someone to hold me up. Thank you to Kelly and Isaac for giving me the space to make mistakes, to grow, and to learn. And last but not least, I want to thank myself. Oh wait, I just realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Rachel Elizabeth Gordon. Who am I, you may ask? Well, I will tell you. I am happy. You know what else I am? I am kind, compassionate, creative, funny, sarcastic to a fault, simultaneously polite and rude, smart, curious, considerate, loving, and lastly, I am beautiful. Thank you.
Rachel, I just want to thank you for sharing that story. It's really inspirational, and I can tell you're a beautiful, strong young woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cool. Hi, Byron.
Hi, how are you? I just want to welcome you to the Davis family. It's great to have another sister. I know that you'll make a great addition because you're a kind, compassionate person.
Oh, thank you so much. Alright, well.
I was going to say, I thought that was a really courageous and beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your honesty and for sharing your results.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Hi.
I'm sorry that we met at the very end.
That's okay.
I would have liked to known you sooner.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I think next is Emma Hosettler. So, enjoy.